Well, at this point, I've talked about nearly every Half-Life game, from the original to sequels, remakes, and spin-offs. And, well, all that effort would have gone to waste without touching on the last few games I haven't addressed. Half-Life 2's episodic mini-sequels, episodes 1 and 2, released in 06 and 07 respectively, and pick up straight from where Half-Life 2 leaves off. Now, if you've seen my recent video about Half-Life 2, you'll know that while I still hold it as one of my favorite shooters ever released, it's shown its age in many a way. So today, I wanted to look at the later released episodes to see what lessons were learned from the original's reception and where they stand today. So before we start, we have to address Half-Life 2's development. I'm a big believer of no game being worth crunch, as in working your employees long, stressful hours for the sake of delivering the game sooner. And while Half-Life 2 is still one of my favorite shooters of all time, it's no secret that the final stretch of the game's development way back in 2004 was hell. There's plenty of information about it available online, but for the sake of this video, one thing is worth noting. The abrupt ending of Half-Life 2 was as a result of development constraints, most likely. So, the decision was to leave it at that, and, following the game's universal success, return to the exact moment of the story's cutoff to pick up the pieces. As such, the opening act of Half-Life 2 Episode 1 is effectively just the ending of Half-Life 2 expounded upon, with some extra content to justify its own existence. Let me explain. Just after the destruction of the Combine Citadel's reactor, G-Man's usual intrusion is interrupted by several Vortigaunts rescuing Alex and Gordon from the immediate blast, bringing them just outside of the Citadel, but still well within City 17. Now the Citadel is unstable, the core is due to explode soon, and it's seemingly being rushed along on purpose by the Combine. Both story and gameplay-wise, this gives the game a reason to put Gordon and Alex back in the Citadel, and reintroduce the Super Gravity Gun, a lovely tool which goes underutilized in the original game. Something that's always bothered me about Episode 1 is the Super Gravity Gun, as far as I can tell, is the only reason why Gordon's suit and health can be supercharged with dark energy in the Citadel, past their usual limits, but Episode 1 allows you to reach these high values before acquiring the Super Gravity Gun the second time, despite both the gun's powers and your suit's extra charge. None of that matters. What's worth addressing first and foremost is Alex's place in both the story and gameplay. Likely due to development constraints, Alex's role in Half-Life 2's gameplay becomes exceedingly limited in the final acts of the game, getting kidnapped off-screen and only reappearing while trapped in a Combine pod in the Citadel. Now, with the developers having more time and freedom to work, she's given a mainstay role as Gordon's partner in crime. With reworked AI and care taken to ensure she doesn't repeat lines or get in the way, Alex feels like a very natural companion. At no point in Episode 1, or indeed Episode 2, does her presence feel like an escort mission or a burden. I'm just glad to have someone to talk to, even if it's a one-way conversation, and her combat assistance proves vital too. Of course, once the game puts more of a focus on platforming close to the core of the Citadel, the game brilliantly decides to keep Alex outside the chamber. Using the story excuse of the chamber being bathed in radiation makes it easy to set Alex aside the moment her being around would get in the way of jumping over pits and close quarters combat. After a direct intervention to stabilize the core and finding out the overload was meant to create a portal to send a packet of data to the Combine homeworld, Alex and Gordon hop on a rail to get as far as they can out of City 17, before immediately crashing and having to make their way on foot. However, with the impending detonation of the Citadel being delayed, it's not the end of the world. That already happened. This part of the game is what starts to actually feel like its own expansion rather than tying up loose ends of Half-Life 2, marked by the introduction of new enemies. Sure, the stalkers from earlier technically count, but they aren't really proper opposition, more so acting as puzzle pieces than enemies.
Zombine, right? Zombine
are toughened up versions of zombies who will pull grenades and charge at you when low on health. Seeing as your firearms are rather limited at this point, the best strategy is to stick with the gravity gun while aiming your flashlight at targets you want Alex to take out. This gives your companion more function beyond more firepower, as she doesn't run out of ammo like you do. It becomes a team-based effort proper to escape the underground and reach the surface. At this point, I'd like to talk about these antlion pits. Throughout Half-Life 2, Antlions are typically an enemy of consequence, often unforeseen, accidentally stepping on the sand traps and spawning antlions to battle. And that's still technically the case in episode 1, but it's more proactive. Antlion spawn pits combine together with two previously unrelated mechanics, being enemy spawns and the gravity gun. The gravity gun is typically used as an offensive or a restorative measure, blasting a barrel at an enemy or picking up supplies from a distance. But the idea of it being a preventative measure never had much time to be explored in Half-Life 2. While I would have liked to see Antlion allies with the bug bait explored more, I think that would have been too crowded, with an army of Antlions and an Alex in tow. Anyways, once the tension reaches the surface, episode 1 feels like more Half-Life 2, which isn't a bad thing by any means, but is rather an anticlimax after what we've just survived. Having Alex hop on the sniper rifle and manning turrets as you move civilians to rescue trains is all interesting, but not necessarily groundbreaking. Like I said, Alex feels very much like a real, proper companion in her travels with you, contrasting the constant bailing on you in the original game. So it's a shame when the game relegates her to roles which could easily be done with bare-bones AI. Contrasting that, when she picks up a shotgun and helps you blast your way through the hospital stretch of the game, that's where she really proves herself to be of extraordinary value. Overall, episode 1's best moments, in my opinion, are when the game focuses on Alex and Gordon as a team, and its weakest are when it plays catch-up for the abrupt conclusion of Half-Life 2. And there's some awkward spots in the middle where it feels like it's just doing more of the same. At its worst, it's still Half-Life 2, and is an overall good, albeit rather short experience, but nothing compared to episode 2. After trusting that you will escape from the city, you and Alex wake up in the surrounding forests to a portal storm, caused by the Combine's intentional detonation of the Citadel. Alex, with Data in tow, needs your help to get to the new Black Mesa Institute in White Forest, to give the coordinates needed to reverse the polarity of the neutron flow or whatever. Closing the portal is the goal, preventing the Combine from sending the Data back to their homeworld. However, once again, Alex is plucked from the plot by having her taken down by a new kind of enemy, the Hunter. Seeing as the game has taken the liberty of relieving you of your weapons, there isn't much for you to do. So normally, I'd be frustrated at having a companion who once again gets completely taken out of the equation. However, episode 2's nearly doubled length over episode 1 makes way for this to be doable. And besides, rather than leaving Alex to her own devices, the goal is now to seek medical attention as soon as possible. Faced up against new kinds of antlions, episode 2 really does strive for new types of enemies, both variants of old foes and new kinds altogether. The introduction of antlion workers helps drive home the point of how powerful the Resonance Cascade truly was and how devastating the portal storms on Earth have been. The antlions are supposedly supposed to have arrived in a similar fashion to headcrabs and other Zen kind in Half-Life 1, but since Half-Life 2's main use of them implies them to simply have been part of the Earth and spawn on the coast, this wasn't really made clear. So seeing the actual caverns and ecosystem of the antlions builds the world of Half-Life further in a much needed way. And working your way through the caverns, stepping on growing grubs and blasting through acid-spitting antlions brings you to what I'd call the first act of episode 2. I'd say the game is split up into 4 discrete acts after the introduction, the first being the mineshaft where the Vortigaunts and a few resistance fighters have set up shop, and now is a combination of a lot of underused mechanics coming together in harmony, as hopper mines, turrets, and 2 AI companions join you to defend from wave after wave of angry antlions. This segment is memorable to me for multiple reasons. Not only is the tower defense genre a personal favorite of mine, but also it's, as far as I can recall, the only place in any Half-Life game with both an infinite shotgun and SMG supply, meaning my strategy of swapping between the 2 guns I discussed in my HL2 ammo economy video, linked above and below, is more than bountiful here. Eventually, Vortigaunts join up with you for an explosive finale, and then the game returns to more standard HL2 fare, except with a Vortigaunt companion. This creates an interesting dynamic, as from the perspective of the Vortigaunts, Freeman is both a saint and a sinner, having fought against countless numbers of them only to free them from imprisonment as he becomes aware of it. So hearing tell of Freeman's antics, falling into pits, sprinting down steel corridors, smacking open alien goop with a crowbar, from the eye of a Vortigaunt is fascinating, to say the least.
No pit would be complete without a Freeman kind eye.
yet another new kind of enemy finds its way into this stretch of the game, although perhaps that's being a bit generous. Functionally, it's simply a tougher antlion guard, but in practice, it's a new idea by its specific use. The Vortigaunts need antlion eggs. Their boundless energy can be harnessed for a useful purpose of bringing Alex back from the dead. The why or how isn't so much the important thing here as the where. In the middle of an antlion nest, guarded by the Guardian. However, the catch is, if the Guardian were to die, the antlion nectar would expire. So this makes the Guardian effectively an immortal killer chasing you, if only for a brief stretch. With shoot being removed from the usual process of run, think, shoot, live, the finale of the Antlion Caverns proves exciting. Already within the first act of episode 1, we've explored new kinds of enemies, companions, and multiple new kinds of gameplay. Without needing to expound upon story beats left unconcluded from Half-Life 2, episode 2's first hour has a lot of room to play. Knock knock, who's that? Well, it's Gaman, who's able to rear his head due to the Vortigaunts being in the midst of pulling Alex out of the afterlife. This speech is arguably my favorite, due not only to the contempt G-Man has for you at this point, but his very direct intervention with the story. Kind of like his antics in opposing force. In fact, sidebar here, upon replaying the episodes, I found myself comparing them to the Gearbox-developed expansions for the original Half-Life, with episode 1 drawing many parallels to Blue Shift, feeling much closer to the game it's expanding upon instead of its own thing. Short and sweet, plenty of puzzles, and you even end the game with escorting AI companions to safety from the impending destruction of the game's location. Whereas episode 2 finds itself more comparable to opposing force, a stronger lean on combat against new types of enemies, plenty of optional supply caches you explore with your AI companions, and in terms of the story, G-Man's more direct influence is the cause of most of the game's conflict. I don't think these similarities are intentional, and I'm probably reading into it too much, but it is interesting to see the progression of these mechanics, how far we've come in terms of companion AI and in-world storytelling. Speaking of which, seeing the aftermath of a rebel base stricken with headcrabs and Combine alike begins the second of 4 acts in episode 2. With a Vortigaunt and Alex standing by as support, you have to work your way through a large vertical level in search of a car to drive to the new White Forest base with. As I discussed in my Half-Life Alyx video, Valve likes to make use of tall maps with repeated areas stacked on top of one another, working your way up and down and all around with your goal visible in the distance through fences and glass walls. Alex is again resigned to being a simple sniper, but story-wise it makes enough sense as she was just brought back from the dead, not to mention how much more interesting it is to have a sniper on one of these vertical levels. The idea of having to take out cover with the gravity gun so Alex could shoot at targets was briefly touched on in episode 1, but in a way that feels like a tutorial for it being used properly in practice here. You know how people joke about every Half-Life 2 physics puzzle being a basic scale? Well, it actually becomes somewhat more impressive on a colossal scale, pun intended, even to this day. Creating a ramp by weighing down one side of a collapsed bridge with cars using the gravity gun is oddly satisfying, and the views you have on this area from the start combined with the time to think on it as you travel towards it lends brilliantly to that cherished aha moment of all good Valve puzzles. Now, finally, Alex rejoins you for your adventures in the new and exciting muscle car, the powerhouse, the Chad Jeep. This stretch of the game serves as a way to reacquaint yourself with Alex and to drop some major plot beats which go completely unexplored in future games. One detail here I really enjoy is when hunters ambush you, Alex shows genuine fear before recomposing herself to deal with the attack. She's not simply stoic and unwavering, but not completely helpless. It feels human. Now we're rounding the corner to the conclusion of Act 2. The helicopter segment from Water Hazard makes a return, except now it's really goddamn cool? With detailed environments, a companion to handle enemies on the ground, and a better handling vehicle. Fuck. Well, before it can overstay your welcome, your car gets shot to shit, and now with few options remaining, a bomb-happy chopper and a gravity gun, this fight has all the excitement and flair the chopper battle in Half-Life 2 wishes it could have had. With this boss fight rounds out Act 2, and now with Alex catching her breath and the car under repairs, a side quest of sorts has Freeman disarming a Combine machine gun through a maze of zombies and trashed cars. This pseudo-stealth segment is again a fun exploration of mechanics simply teased or outright unused in the main game. Episode 2 is full of stuff like this. At no point does the game really feel like just more Half-Life 2, as Episode 1 so often does. Every part of this expansion feels like something new, using ideas which you've already been familiarized with through, presumably, having already played the previous 2 installments. That's the fun thing about essentially DLC campaigns. The developers can safely assume you've already played the main game and thus don't need to simplify mechanics you've already explored. Episode 2 feels like it just starts right up and then keeps trying new things its whole way through. For instance, getting into Act 3, the game knows you already have enough familiarity with driving to mix things up with a new radar. Supply caches are strewn throughout the road as you see Alex safely to White Forest. And as you go, you'll get alerted on the radar to areas where you can pull off little mini-raids. Alex will help you take down enemies as you locate supplies. And brilliantly, in areas where there are no enemies to be found and supplies are hidden behind puzzles, Alex opts to stay in the car as to not get in the way of, say, using the gravity gun. I'm spending a lot more time going on about Episode 2 than I thought I would, but there's just so much to talk about. So we'll skip ahead a bit, as there's plenty of combat, puzzles, and secrets throughout this stretch, but all of it is better played than explained. I will say, however, once you have White Mesa inbound, reuniting with Dog and challenging him to a race is absolutely wonderful. A charming little addition with no real consequence. But speaking of consequences, Act 4, the finale. Now reunited with Eli, Kleiner, and the grumpy Dr. Magnuson, Gordon is tasked with dealing with seemingly false alarms in the secondary rocket silo, interrupting the work of launching the rocket to counter the Combine portal. It's a lot, and it's not really well explained. A surprise Combine! This stretch of the game boasts heavy Half-Life 1 vibes in all the right ways. The corridors, the sightlines, optional side routes, all a bit claustrophobic, but not enough to be any more than a slight added challenge. And the finale has you operating a turret to force back the Combine as you seal off the silo, holding off their assault for long enough to get the science team to decode the data Alex relayed to them. Lots of plot beats get dropped at this point, and have any of them been explored since? Nope, not really. Valve has been unable or unwilling to continue the story from this point on. There's more I could say on that, but it'd get into some heavy spoiler territory for Half-Life Alyx, so you can either play it or look up an LP of it for yourself to get more info. But that doesn't matter, because truly the most exciting part here is the big finish. Armed with launchable sticky grenades, a muscle car, and a free-roam map with plenty of pit stops for supplies, the finale has you battling it out against waves of hunters and striders before they can reach the silo to destroy the rockets. This is far and away the most exciting fight in all of Half-Life to me. It combines the puzzle mechanics, gravity gun, driving, combat, friendly AI with high stakes but room to make mistakes. The decision making of where to go first, but guided by the simple linear goal of stop the enemy from reaching this point. Everything about this Strider battle satisfies me in a way only Half-Life could. And after all of it, seeing the rocket launch as the culmination of all your hard work is just, God, Episode 2 holds up so well. It really offers everything I didn't know I wanted. So, what was the point of this video? Because it seemed weird to have talked about nearly every other Half-Life game except the episodes? Yeah. Because I made some observations about their place in the series upon replaying? Absolutely. Because Half-Life videos get far more attention than anything else I've made recently? Yes, shut up. But more than anything, I find it interesting how much better they've aged, even compared to Half-Life 2. Don't get me wrong, HL2 is still excellent, but in terms of combat, companion AI, and driving, there was a lot left on the table, which saw further exploration in the episodes, particularly Episode 2. Even things as simple as the flashlight being removed from your sprint and breath reserves in the HEV suit streamlines gameplay in a way that both the original and Episode 1 really could have used. What's to be learned from this? Well, sometimes reiterating on a thing that already works can create an even better result when new challenges are presented. You want Alex to accompany Gordon through both episodes? That means improving the companion AI beyond its already serviceable iteration in HL2. You want to have a focus on driving? then best make it more interesting with the radar mechanic and Magnusons. All of this is to say, Episode 2 is the best iteration of Half-Life 2, engine and mechanic-wise. Level design-wise in a lot of ways too, but obviously it's easier to praise a shorter game for having good level design. If it tried to extend to the full length of Half-Life 2, who's to say it could keep up? But final conclusions? Episode 1 is better viewed as the ending Half-Life 2 deserved. It has extra content to justify its separate existence, but is essentially more Half-Life, featuring improved companion AI. Episode 2, on the other hand, is the complete package, touching on lots of ideas, new and old alike, long enough to explore them, but short enough to not overstay their welcome. But no matter what, the three should absolutely be played together as one experience that gets better the further through it you get. And that's all the Half-Life content I really have to make for now. I feel as though I'm deserving of a rest, so I'd appreciate if you'd subscribe and check out some of my other videos. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and take it easy.